I don't want to waste your time, so there won't be an intro. When conceptualizing defense in Rainbow Six, you probably don't think about actively doing something. Instead, the first association is probably passively reacting to what the attackers throw at you. And that does make sense, right? I mean, due to the asymmetric prep phase, the defenders start out controlling the entire map, so it's up to the attackers to make things happen. But we also learn pretty quickly that defenders can't just sit in sight and wait for the attackers to come. Instead, modern defense requires teams to use a concept that I call playing the map, which is a much more active style of defending. The idea is that you start contesting the attackers as soon as they enter the map. But instead of trying to take gunfights and getting kills, your main objective is actually to shoot drones, waste time, and to gradually fall back to sight. Now, the G2 defenses that I'll be showing you in this video don't exactly reinvent the wheel when it comes to active defending, but their execution of the concept is on a whole nother level. Throughout their defense half, it never felt like G2 was ever on the back foot. It was pretty much always them acting and BDS reacting. So obviously, there is a bunch of stuff that we can learn here. Let's start with the very first defense round of G2. The site is Bunk Daycare, BDS is approaching the map from the east side, and as you can see, G2 is meeting them very early on. And it's important to note that Valk's and Jaeger's positions are not part of some kind of larger setup. There are no ADS, there is no barbed wire, and there aren't any walls reinforced. They very obviously don't intend to play these positions for the entire round. Instead, G2 is exclusively playing for drones. You get droned out, you shoot the drone, and then you fall back. Sadly, we don't really get to see what's happening after Valk left, but if we keep an eye on how many drones BDS has alive, then we can kind of piece the puzzle together. Jaeger is doing pretty much the same thing that Valkyrie was doing earlier, shooting drones and falling back. And at some point, both of them are reunited back at the site. So, let's take a look at what exactly their roam game has accomplished. Obviously, no player has died, or even taken damage. So I guess that on a surface level, nothing really happened. But then you go a layer deeper and look at the clock. BDS has already lost over a minute, and they haven't even set foot into the building yet. But the true accomplishment of the roam is the fact that BDS is down to only 5 drones, without having anything to show for it. I mean, if you saw this frame with the timer blurred out, then you could easily mistake it for the beginning of the round. And the best thing about it is that it didn't cost G2 anything to get into this position. In fact, after Kanto reinforced top yellow, which by the way is a really smart move, there is nothing that differentiates this round from a round in which the defenders didn't roam at all. Well, except of course, the fact that BDS is down a minute and half their drones. So up until now, this round is just a really good illustration of the benefits of playing the map as a defender. But that's not where it ends. In this situation, now that G2 has left, BDS could easily take control of the east side of the map. But the thing is, they didn't even notice that G2 left. As you can see, all of them are still outside on the balcony, and instead of entering the building, they actually decide to rotate to the other side of the map. That's just the best case scenario for G2. But something like this actually happens quite regularly. Maybe not in that extreme of a fashion, where the attackers entirely abandon their original idea, but with limited drones, it's often difficult to notice that all of the defenders are already gone. Ultimately, BDS ends up in a situation where they only have 1 minute on the clock, they only have 3 drones, and they still haven't set foot into the building. Basically, G2 was in control of that round from start to finish. And that's not the only round that went like this. Let's jump to round 13 of the same game. As you can see, G2 is following the same game plan again. Kanto in this very forward position, being supported by Virtue in Office and Uno in Initiation. BDS is also in pretty much the same position again, but this time they seem to have found a solution against G2's Dragon Control. They send Sledge into maintenance, where he tries to clear Jaeger from below. But now, look at how Jaeger just beautifully handles the situation. He realizes the threat, he takes down 3 drones and just retreats. Now, that might not seem all that impressive, but what you have to realize is that playing this position is actually really difficult. Because on the one hand, you want to keep playing there and shoot as many drones as possible, but at the same time, you also want to survive. And finding that balance between greed and safety is far from easy. But Kanto does it perfectly. So just like in the previous round, G2 is in a really good position. But once again, it doesn't end here. We saw Kanto leaving office and reinforcing the wall, and now we see Uno doing the same thing on the other side. So once again, G2 just doesn't give away anything for free here. And they're not doing it in a caveman style, where they contest the map by taking every single gunfight. Instead, G2's way of contesting the map is incredibly sophisticated. And the end product is that BDS does get map control, but only after 2 whole minutes, and with only 4 drones remaining, and with the side walls closed. All in all, not exactly ideal conditions to set up and execute. And to really hammer home the point, I want to show you the very next round of that map, because now it's BDS' turn to defend Bunk and Daycare. And here you can immediately see the difference in how both teams approach that defense. Because while BDS also have a rotation hole in Office to Yellow Stairs, they don't have any players over on the east side. Literally no one. And now, just look at the speed with which G2 is taking control of that whole area. It's almost funny how the 2 rounds are just polar opposites of each other. While it took BDS 2 minutes and 6 drones to get into a position to breach, G2 is in exactly the same position but losing only 1 minute and having a total of 10 drones left alive at this point. If that doesn't convince you that G2's way of playing the defense is just straight up superior, then nothing will. In fact, I think that the rounds we've just seen should be the textbook example when it comes to active defending and playing the map. Now, all of this would have been enough to justify its own video, but with G2's defenses, there's even more to learn. The idea of playing the map has a very natural limit to it, because if you continuously shoot drones and retreat, there will be a point at which there is no more space to retreat to, and that usually spells the end of active defending. But that's also not that big of a deal, because most of the time, the defenders are actually better off just playing passively and waiting for the attackers to come to them. But as you're going to see in a minute, that's not the only way to play. In the round you're seeing right now, G2 is defending Lab and Drugs, and of course, they are again playing the map. Frost and Jaeger are on the top floor, where they waste a bunch of time and then decide to fall back. And just a quick note, BDS has lost 9 drones with half the round remaining. So again, G2's playstyle in the early and mid game is working out really well against BDS. But okay, now that Frost and Jaeger have left, we kind of entered the late game. And like I said before, there's usually not that much the defenders can actively do right now. You just play your spots and try to survive against vertical play. But that's not what's happening here. Instead of just waiting around, G2 decides to take matters into their own hands by going for a flank. And it's not your average gold elo Kavira flank. In fact, it shouldn't even be called a flank. It should probably be called a retake, because G2 is making a coordinated effort to full-on retake the top floor with 3 players at once. Now, if you watch my streams, you will know that I'm not that big of a fan of flanking. I think that most of the time it's just an unnecessary risk, especially because flank watch isn't exactly rare in Pro League. Although, in order to do that effectively, you kind of need drones, which BDS happens to not have. So the G2 retake is a great success. That is, until Bride gets this double kill, which kind of evens the odds again, and you know, that's just how Rainbow works. But the fact remains that right after the retake, G2 had a crushing advantage. So I guess that if you're playing a really well coordinated retake against attackers that don't have any drones left, even I can get behind the idea of flanking. And that wasn't the last flank of the game. We are now in round 12 with G2 playing a throne defense. At this point I probably don't need to tell you, but of course G2 started out the round playing very far up on the east side. They shot drones and eventually fell back towards the west side. And that's where we are right now. 25 seconds left and BDS is pretty much ready to play their maintenance execute. And this time around, they actually have a designated flank watch player in Renshiro. At the moment, his job is pretty simple. He basically only needs to focus on waiting door, because that's the only way that G2 can attempt a flank. But not for long, because Virtue is about to use his C4 to blow up the office wall. And going back to the overview, we can see why that's a really smart play. First of all, it's obviously a distraction for Renshiro. All of a sudden, he needs to watch two entrances. But it also serves to connect the defenders in a way. At the moment, Virtue doesn't really contribute anything to the flank, right? If Kanto walks in right now, Virtue is just a non-factor. But by blowing up the office wall, he gets to participate in the flank. And I think this idea of G2 players trying to flank together is a pretty big part of their success. Sadly, things don't really work out that well here, and Virtue gets killed before he is able to detonate the C4. But looking at how Kanto pushed into waiting right as the C4 was supposed to go off, you can still very much tell that this flank was a coordinated effort between Kanto and Virtue. And somehow, Kanto actually makes it through alive. The only problem is that his teammates are losing control of the site, so even though the flank was successful, G2 still lost the round. But it once again gave us a deeper look into the philosophy behind G2's defenses. In this situation, you could have easily had 4 or even 5 defenders on site and just waited for the BDS execute. But instead, G2 prefers to be in control of the round for the entire time. And that's really the theme for pretty much every round that they played on defense. In the earlier mid-game, it wasn't BDS taking map control. It was G2 actively contesting the map and then at some point allowing BDS to take map control. And then in the late game, instead of passively waiting for the execute, G2 decides to take the fight to BDS by going for these flanks. So the entire game really was a masterclass in active defending. At least that's one way of looking at it. Because I'm sure that some of you might think that this only worked so well because BDS wasn't playing seriously. And that is half true. Now, I personally am convinced that both teams played at their full strength. There just wasn't a major difference between how BDS played here versus how they played in the November Major. But in a way, that's exactly why G2's game plan worked so well here. BDS is a team that historically struggles with droning and flank watch. So if the defenders are playing strategies that prey on these weaknesses, you're going to see some pretty insane results. That being said, I do think that the mindset with which G2 approach their defenses is going to work against any team on any map. Well, at least the playing the map part. Regarding the flanking, I'm still not entirely convinced. It was obviously a very smart idea against BDS specifically, but if you're playing against SSG for example, you might want to tone down the flanking a bit. Either way, this was a very instructional game. And honestly, it gave me some new hope for G2's performance at the Invitational. Although it came at a loss of hope for BDS. Well, in any case, I'm really excited to see what's happening at the SI. But alright, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you learned something new, and thanks for watching.